and gentlemen, everyone around and in between. It is Debate Sensei Limited Preparation Edition. We talk about things that are relevant to competitive debate in limited preparation format. So that means that there's a different topic every time. And so every once in a while, we like taking a deep dive on a potential topic that might come up in multiple rounds. I have with me Tim Seavey, a semi-professor. All right.
Semi-professional professor.
Semi-pro.
Not really fully there.
Yeah. I like that. Semi-pro. It's a hilarious movie. All right. So I'm Jared Kabuka Miller. I am a full-on professor.
Full professor.
Full on. All right. Debate coach and stuff like that. And so we're going to be talking about something in the rip from the headlines type of topic, all right? The deep dive that we're doing, and that is the impending government shutdown. I guess it kind of got pushed off a little bit, but
it always kind of gets pushed off, and then always kind of is going to be here in another couple of weeks or months. So that's why I feel like it is a perpetually relevant topic. Kicking the can down the road, as they call it, is the standard practice of just continuation resolutions, where it's not passing a full year budget, because they have to pass a full year budget every year, which means that every year this topic is going to be relevant, and almost every time it becomes a big political sticking point. So funding, both sides have the reasons for why we should fund more to this and less of this, but it oftentimes comes down to, hey, if we don't come to an agreement, the government shuts down. If you don't have a budget passed, then all those things that are required to have an approval from Congress cease. Now, many of them are like essential services and things that can't cease, but those people then just have to go to work without pay. So as far as starting with our definitions of what does a government shutdown mean, it's not like everything literally is just lights off. It's a number of things still function, but many of them have to go without pay, which really, really sucks. So one of the things I found, for example, is 3/4 of the Department of Homeland Security just has to work without pay, which seems kind of messed up. And I don't think they have any recourse for many of them don't have the capability to apply for things like unemployment. So however long the government is shut down, they just don't have money for that period of time. And there's no, compensation to make up for it. Once the funding bill eventually is passed, cool. But up until that point, they've just got to live on savings and credit cards and whatever they got. So that's pretty rough, because that also even affects military. So enlisted Coast Guard folks, for example, don't have the ability to apply for anything. They are, a branch of the military to an extent, and it is not covered. They just have to continue doing what they're doing, protecting and serving, and not getting any payment for it.
So, okay. If you're a debater and you are faced with all of these factoids and bits of trivia as far as we're concerned, how do you use that in a competitive round? I don't know about you, but my first instinct is that this is probably the best way to use this is for internal link scenarios on disadvantages, where if you want to do a politics disadvantage, you're so who cares if the Republicans are pissed off about this policy or the Democrats are pissed off about that policy? Who cares? They get pissed off about everything. It's okay, well, let me tell you about government shutdowns and why that's a very likelihood a result of what you're talking about. Not necessarily, so the internal link scenario, I think that, I don't know. What do you think? Where would you place this information in your overall sort of debates, or the most likely one? At least let's start there. Uh-oh. Okay, you're back. I don't know if it was me or you this time. Was I frozen?
That was me. I think my internet's rough, but I agree with the direction you're going with that. It's also accessible ground on both sides. Both sides can use that as a link scenario to be able to say if this were to happen, here's all the precipitous negative impacts that result from not agreeing on it. I like it because it means going into the round, you're guaranteed to have some good meat to it. Sometimes you get into a round about student loan debt or something, and like, okay, I can probably impact that out to like, here's who it affects and here's what that really looks like in their life. But the more specific policies and stuff, sometimes it's difficult to impact that down to like, yeah, but what will that look like for an everyday person's life, or like who will that impact and how? Whereas this is, government shutdown type topics, you pretty much guarantee like there's a bunch of evidence that either side can use to say like this is what really is the result. And so that becomes a useful weighing tool in prep time. You can say, all right, if we're going to make this all about immigration, right, that if such and such a thing doesn't pass, that was like the most recent extension that they passed on the budget was because of the subject of immigration, that the budget did or didn't include enough like border patrol ICE folks. And so when that isn't the case, I know a bunch of Republicans disagree with it, or Democrats disagree with it, basically. So you end up with people saying, hey, we want the policy to be this certain way. You now have a pretty clear mechanism of like, here are all the harms that would be solved if this additional measure, in this case immigration, were to be included in the budget. Weigh that against all the folks that are furloughed meaning working without pay. So they're like forced to continue doing their job and not getting paid for it until the budget passes. Weigh those two things against each other, and sometimes it actually may pan out like you can kind of rhetorically assert that it is worth it. Like, hey, yes, that really sucks, all of these people not getting payment up until then. And they don't care about the policy one way or another. They're just going to want to get this thing pressed through. So therefore, use it. Like, wow, that really sucks, right? Like, you're accepting that negative. If you're weighing the round on net benefits, say like, and meanwhile, people are dying because of XYZ things. Ukrainian support or aid to Gaza are other examples there. Like, these things are not included. This many people will die. So sure, put the pressure on because it's not going to have as big an impact here as there, or something like that. Those kinds of weighing mechanisms, I think, are helpful as a debater to start using any of those tools. Like, there may be even helpful tools of like a turn. Like, great, yeah, these people are really pissed off because they're furloughed, and therefore even more inclined to put pressure on their representatives or whatever. Or like they're going to, vote whoever representatives out of office that made them work without pay. So you can say like, great, good, do it, because that's going to mean change in leadership or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So is it like the shutdown?
You was frozen. So
I heard you the whole time though. So I'm going to continue. It like the internal link scenario kind of gives you access to a number of different potential impacts. You can explain, you can, like use it, but it seems to kind of the story seems to kind of coalesce around that, where you could take any affirmative and say, all right, this leads to a shutdown, and now the shutdown leads to any number of impacts. So there is, like, I think, strategic value in a disadvantage like that. You could talk. So if you want to talk about Ukraine, then you could talk about Ukraine, right? But if you wanted to talk about certain, like, I think like education might have, well, not as much, right? But like Social Security benefits, I believe, still get sent out, or is that?
Yeah, I believe Social Security does. But Department, so Homeland Security is a big one. OSHA is another one that gets put on pause. Right. So like Occupational Safety Health Administration, something like that. So inspections for job sites don't happen during that period. Like, those just cease. So you can start saying like, without funding, here are the actual, tangible things that come to a screeching halt, and the lives that are put at risk because of it.
The cool thing is that those different impacts, you can kind of tailor them to whatever the topic might be. You know what I mean? It's like, so if you're talking about like an international topic, then you could talk about the international aid portion of the budget, that will happen during a government shutdown. But if you're talking about, any number of domestic things like the FCC, right? Sure. And so how that might affect travel. Sure. So I think it's a really versatile sort of story,
Sure. Yeah. From like a topic standpoint, I'm not sure exactly how a resolution would be phrased around something like this, but I could see like in like an IPDA round, it coming out like, this house would shut it down, and they're talking about government shutdowns and things and like how it can be strategically used. But in like a parley round, I think it might be something like, so before the filibuster was removed a couple of years ago, which is bananas, that was a regular topic of like, the United States federal government should do away with the filibuster. And it was because it was being used so consistently as this political tool to prevent progress and like halt anything because, whatever reason. And then eventually people just, like the Dems voted to do away with it. That same thing I think could be argued here, where it's like the United States federal government should, pass a policy to prevent government shutdowns or something. Because right now it's being used as this political leverage tool, yet it's not harming the politicians that are sitting in the room talking about it. Like it's just another, piece on the board that they're playing with, that hundreds of thousands of people's livelihoods are impacted based on what decisions they make with it. So having some kind of policy, like, I don't know how exactly that would happen, but I think that's a worthwhile thing to debate about. So if I were running a tournament, I might run something like that.
Why am I forgetting the name of it? But the credit cap that they're always fighting over, which
national
is
debt. Debt
yeah. They have to vote on increasing that amount, right?
Right, the debt ceiling. Yeah.
That's usually where that's where the shutdowns revolve around oftentimes, right? They're like, we don't want to do this because we don't want
that one in the budget. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one possibility was removing that requirement. That's
a really good one.
Yeah, just remove that, the debt limit. That's what it's called, right? It's like removing the debt limit. And so the debt limit is whatever spending that was voted on the bills. You know what I mean? It's like that when bills become law, they have a certain cost to them, and that's what the debt that we're taking on. If you want to lower the debt limit, you have to eliminate those rules.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting topic, right? Because that gets you into territory of like what things spend for the sake of spending, because they have a budget, and then if they don't meet that budget, they lose that budget. So and like that as a policy is just bad, but it exists all over the place, where organizations, companies, whatever, but the federal government also like, well, this is the budget, so we've got to spend that budget. And all right, looking at those as examples, when there is a finite cap, all of those departments are going to spend as much as they can spend.
Right.
Like in order to get to that limit so they don't, lose it for the next year, which is crazy. But so those are some of I think the more like specific pieces you can throw in as to like why having a debt ceiling is bad. But you end up with the opposite, with completely reasonable disadvantages to removing the debt ceiling of like complete runaway spending. Right? Like we can approve a whole bunch of things. Like you go out to the mall, don't know how much you have, what your spending limit is on your credit card, just given a black card, and you spend on everything that you think you need. And that means you don't end up budgeting for things all that well. Like if you don't have a budget, you are guaranteed to overspend your means. So I think like there's just some kind of basic accounting principle in there. But I think there's good refutation also back on the other side of like, what is too much? Like, what does it mean to overspend? Like, is someone going to actually call our debts, right? So where like the U.S. owes a ton of debt to China. That's a very common topic. I hear that in links to, or then like uniqueness points actually all the time of like, oh, the U.S. Already owes, this many $1 trillion or whatever to another country. And that's going to lead to these, particular things because they're already so upset. It's like a brink scenario, I guess, that it'll be brought up. And I don't know that I've ever bought that. Like, I don't know, when countries call in the debt of another country of like, hey, all right, you actually have to pay on this. I don't know if anyone could call in the debt on the U.S.
Yeah, I know. Like those scenarios seemed so awesome when I was a debater. I'm like, oh, yeah, like it seems so reasonable, right? And I'm like, okay, that's probably not going to happen. But it's still, it's something that technically on paper could happen, so everyone just kind of believes that it's a possibility,
and it's a gigantic number, so it feels really dramatic, and it's like, oh, look at this stat, like just look at the debt clock thing, and it's now suddenly like it feels really impactful just by nature of saying it. But like, yeah, those same arguments were run when you were debating and when I was debating and how people are debating now, and still those impacts aren't coming to fruition. But that's not to say there are not potentially very, very harmful long-term economic impacts of just continuous deficit spending.
Yeah, like you kind of want to have some of those Brinks stories, though. Like one of the good Brink stories on the government shutdowns is the downgrading of U.S. credit by S&P.
Yeah, or credit. Yeah, I was going to say.
You know what I mean? Because that was in direct result of a government shutdown. And so those have long-lasting effects that people, just over time learn to accept, but it doesn't make that good, right? So having a lower credit rating means that like the opportunity for you to raise financial capital for any particular large projects goes down.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you were
And
less
interest rates go up too.
Yeah. And so it costs more and you can do less once you have the worst credit rating that you have. And that's a very long-term consequence that we should avoid, what I mean, for something as stupid as this. You know what I mean? There's no reason to be shutting down the government. And so like this is at least a really solid reason to pass a budget, hold your nose, pass it no matter what type of scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool bit of a microcosm as I see it, or like a reflection of how many debate rounds go, where it is a really flashy short-term impact versus a less sexy but very probable long-term impact. So it's the we lose 100,000 jobs or nuclear war. Like, okay, a fraction of a percent chance of like nuclear war could be caused, but a very likely chance if we lose several 100,000 jobs. And it's like, yeah, but that's only a couple 100,000. This is nuclear war. And weighing those things out, that becomes the role of your, leader of opposition and your PM to say in your rebuttal speeches, like really practically weigh these things out. It's not just, magnitude times probability. It's like, I think you have to prioritize those and say, like, personally as a judge, I always tell students in my paradigm, like, I like probability significantly more than magnitude, because I think it's just so easy to go for the big flashy thing of like extinction scenario off of everything. But when you've got a high probability, low, magnitude impact, like those are real. And those are the things I feel like we operate on in the real world far more regularly, like a credit getting downgraded. That has real tangible impacts. It doesn't sound as flashy as extinction scenario, but it really does have, detrimental impacts on everyone for a long period of time. And
I think, I think we've kind of touched upon the inherent characteristic of a government shutdown disadvantage as being like one of those high probability type disadvantages that you're going for. And so trying to make the impacts, just appealing to an audience, I get is kind of tough. That's why like the Ukraine stuff starts seeming like a lot, enticing, because you can really, like impact it out to lives and stuff like that. But if you want to keep it reasonable, which I think it would be nice if more and more people had like pretty reasonable, like, no, like we should really be thinking about like our credit rating, right? This is an unforced error. This is dumb. Like even for whatever, whatever big old policy that you are running right now is first off not going to work. And then this sort of, long-term negative impact is something that it should outweigh. It should outweigh whatever the hell you're talking about. And you can make it outweigh, in various different ways. So
those are the practical, realistic ways. The thing that I love about this topic also is it really lends itself well to the entirely impractical, but way more fun topic of de-development, de-dev. Government shutdown, yes, shut it all the way down. Shut everything all the way down. Crash it and then rebuild. So the premise generally behind the argument is that like things are so bad, incremental changes are not going to get it better. We need to have a fundamental rebuild in order to actually fix the systemic problems that exist. So rather than trying to, save and fix and improve these little things, bring the whole sucker down, crash it, and then we have the opportunity to rebuild. If we so choose, or we just live in a state of nature, that's cool too, right? So government shutdown, but say like, no, we're going to raise the, we're going to, pass a spending bill that is $200 quintillion, right? Like we're going to completely overspend for the next several lifetimes. Bring the economy down, bring the government to a complete halt, ensure that there's no money left, and then we have to rebuild with whatever pieces are left. I find those really fun debates.
Okay. Those are, I think those become, I don't know. if you start trying to do those in deep out rounds, I would like be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful about that. Be careful about that. I think you get into some critical areas, but those are fun debates precisely because people don't really work through the arguments enough to understand why people don't propose things like that. You know what I mean? It's like why those aren't a legit proposals. And it really does help me to understand it. I was just talking with Paul Villa from NPDA, NPTE about how I think it was Alison Escalante wrote an article that everyone is referencing about how like these revolutionary ideas will never work because people are too dependent upon government services that there's no alternative for them to move to. And so the people that would be most entertained by de-development would be the ones who can sustain it, which is not poor people. And so like all this stuff that you're talking about, the people that would be affected worst and first would be the people that you claim to be helping.
Yeah. There's no way, like, really, that is very practical. Like, on the subject of practicality versus flash,
right,
that is very much a realistic and good response back to it.
Yeah.
Where I have seen it go interestingly sometimes is in the criteria of a debate can lend itself better to DDev some than others.
Right,
so
right.
You know, if your criteria is like, let's save the most lives or whatever, or economic prosperity, DDev is not going to win. That is absolutely going to lose. However, if you were talking like the value of life, I've seen people do this where it's like, we're going to value all lives. And the other side's like, all right, that's cool. And you're like, great. So we're going to ensure that there are as few human beings remaining at the end of this policy because that's the organism that destroys the most other ecosystems.
Okay.
So we value all lives, not just human lives. They agreed to it. Therefore, let's, remove those species that do harm to other species.
I mean, sometimes it's just fun to suspend the social significance of it, and like kind of like do a logical exercise, right? And this would help with that. But if you're engaging in, so the government shutdown debate can tend to get a little boring and depressing, because it is so likely, and you want to break free from that and talk about very unlikely things. I think that might be a good thing to include in a little bit of top of case. I remember some, rounds in the past where we wanted to do something fun and ironic, and the criteria that we had was whoever can use the most turns in the round wins. And so I thought that was a clever way of using the criteria. And so what you're doing is you're setting it up so it's like no matter how ridiculous the turn is, if it's entertaining, then you're voting for it. You know what I mean? And so it's like who's most creative with their turns is I think a very, very different way of going about it. And that would definitely change the attitude of this particular topic as well.
That's fun. I had never thought of going that kind of route with it. Well, I think
get crazy with criteria. I get crazy with criteria. I think most
you have more fun with criteria
with it. You know what I mean? It's just like the opportunity there to frame the debate is so awesome and like entertaining and engaging and inviting. So it's
Yeah, I do think that's a little bit of a waste when it's just like every round of an entire tournament, everyone just leaves it at net benefits. Like, yeah, okay, sure. But like, what else could we use as a mechanism to evaluate who's better, like whose plan is actually, a preferable one?
Let's do it. Hey, you know what? Let's do an episode. Creative criteria.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Fun. Yeah. We're going to be doing one of those in the near future. Cause I don't know, becoming an old fogey, and you could just sit around and think about stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey, I think that's all we need for this discussion about a government shutdowns and the relevance to the debate. So we are going to be back in the future talking about various other things relevant to limited preparation debate. It is Tim CV, Jared Kubika Miller. We're DebateSensei. thank you very much.
Have a good one.
All right, let's do the outro. Nope. Here we go. Here we go.